So this was genuinely one of the funniest things I've seen in a while. I used to watch a lot of Clueless Gamer. It's a series that Conan O'Brien did for a long time, and he's done it off and on for years, but he posted a new one for Borderlands 4 specifically. And it's basically a guy that's clueless about gaming that gets shown games, and it's quite funny. But something happens in this that's genuinely hilarious, and I'll show it to you in a moment. But also I do want to say, because this was also something spread around, there was in the original version of the video, there was a massive spoiler in the footage and what they showed, to the point where it was like so ridiculous that a lot of people were like, how did this get past review and everything from 2K? And they ended up like taking the video offline. They cut that part out, is my understanding, and now it's not there. But there were discussions and debates over how it happened and how big of a spoiler it was. I'm obviously I'm not going to get into that because it's a spoiler. So like, we're not going to get into that, but it has since been corrected. But I want to show you what happened, because as of right now, where we are, it is currently Wednesday, September 10th at 12:42 p.m. Mountain Time. And we are waiting for reviews to drop at any point today, I believe. And we are waiting patiently. I will have lots to say when the embargo goes up. I've not been able to finish the game because I've been traveling so much, and it does not run on the Steam Deck, so it's not been something I can easily play while like on the plane. But I will have thoughts and I will have stuff to say about it when that embargo lifts. That being said, one of the chief concerns for Borderlands 4 has been performance, okay? Just to offer a little bit of context, Gearbox CEO, or boss, says Borderlands 4 Day 1 patch does a lot, but warns that players should have realistic expectations about performance. Okay, honestly, fair point. Don't expect it to run at like 500 FPS. Older hardware may not provide buttery smooth performance. And I was kind of surprised that this went and spread as far as it did. But basically what he said was the Day 1 patch does a lot. That said, the expectation for using a below min spec machine should be that the game is unplayable. That the game runs at all on your system is a miracle. That you can get 55 or 60 FPS out of a heavy combat is actually incredible given how the engine and what's going on under the hood. Your specification doesn't indicate if you're on an SSD or HDD, but that could also explain some of the hitching. It's a big, bold, new, seamless world that I'm sorry to say that older hardware may not provide buttery smooth performance for the latest AAA games, as has always been the case since the dawn of PC gaming. And this started spreading around, and I genuinely don't know why this was like seen as so dramatic and crazy. You see, staff writer Scott Dewey, I'm not sure, with Destructoid posted this article. I've been playing Borderlands 4 since last week. It is absolutely awesome, but it's also in desperate need of a Day 1 optimization patch on PC. Crashing, hitching, stuttering, and freezing galore. And this is what he was responding to in response to Scott saying there's a Day 1 patch in the works. And so the insinuation is that the version or the PC that Scott is playing on is below the minimum spec, and that's why he's having performance issues. Yeah, he updated the article with his specs. Min spec is a 2080 with an i7 9700 with 16 gigs of RAM. He's running with a 3070 i7 12700K and 16 gigs of RAM and struggles to hit 60 FPS at 1080p. And Scott also updated the article even further, saying he's gotten it running smoother since then. After working with 2K PR, I've worked out the majority of the worst graphical issues I've been having. They also clarified my PC falls below the minimum or below the recommended specs, but does meet minimum specs. The headline has been updated to reflect these new developments. So his PC he's playing on is above the minimum spec, but below the recommended spec, which is why they're saying it's having problems. Okay. What I can say is that my preview, because basically we're allowed to share our preview impressions through a certain point in the game. What I will say is that my preview impressions were that I also was having major stuttering, hitching, and performance issues with the original version of the game that they provided. During this process and the preview process, they have updated the game at least once that has fixed a bunch of those problems. But I was having similar issues, and I'm running well above the recommended spec with a 4090 with 128 gigs of RAM with, what is my CPU? And a Ryzen 9 7950 X3D 16 core processor. Like, I'm not having This is not a spec issue, okay? For me. Not a spec issue for me, okay? So that being said, I understand what he's saying, and honestly, it's not that controversial of a thing. If you're below the minimum spec, you should not expect to be able to play the game at all. That's not a scandalous thing. We can argue over whether that minimum spec is reasonable. That's fair to discuss, but you shouldn't be surprised if it doesn't run the game. And if your game is below the recommended spec, it's not going to run at a recommended ideal level. It just won't. None of this is particularly shocking. But all of these discussions and this debate over performance that I'm sure we'll have a lot more discussions over once the review embargo lifts, that leads us into this Clueless Gamer segment and something very funny that happened. So let's see what it was. Okay, everybody. We got an alert from the stream that they're not going to let us watch the whole video and it's being copyright claimed as we speak. So we're just doing that. But basically what happened is that in this Clueless Gamer episode, he's playing the game. I'll just go with freeze frames, and then it crashes. And it specifically crashes saying, the game has crashed more than once recently. Restoring default settings may fix the issue. And they left it in, dude. They didn't edit this out or anything. It's not even just a crash. It's a crash that says, this has happened multiple times recently. It's honestly kind of hilarious. It's one of the more hilarious things I've ever seen. So this happened. It still ended up in the video, and I just find that very, very, very funny. Yeah, the game crashing while you're playing is the most accurate depiction of modern day AAA gaming. The game crashing in a promotional video is amazing. Yeah, it's genuinely very, very funny. So Borderlands 4 absolutely at this point is a game that we should be optimistic about, hopeful for, because the previews have all been outstanding. The people who are playing it are saying that they love it and they really, really enjoy the game. But the game and the game's performance are two separate things. You'd hope they're both amazing, but in the modern day, that's just not that common. Occasionally we see it where you end up with like a KCD2 and it's freakishly well optimized and it's an amazing game and everybody's happy. But often they're not actually in tandem. And in the case of Borderlands 4, there have been numerous instances of people expressing concern over the performance and the need for the day one patch. And here's the thing, and this is what we'll talk about when the review embargo lifts, okay? Every studio on earth is going to tell you that there will be major improvements in the day one patch. Of course they're going to tell you that because they honestly are trying, and there probably are major improvements. But it's important to understand that from a reviewer's perspective or somebody previewing the game, we cannot just take, or we shouldn't, in my opinion, take on faith what the publisher says. The publisher will say, day one patch is going to fix all your problems. But it very well may not. Your biggest problems may still be in the game after the day one patch, or maybe it is fixed and it genuinely does fix all of your problems. The point is, you don't know. And so all we can, or at least should do, in my opinion, is report on what we've experienced and hope that the day one patch actually does fix it. Now, a recent example of this was Avowed. You guys may remember my review of Avowed back in May, I think it was. And basically, I ran into every bug and soft lock in that entire game. Like, seriously, it was insane. I ran into multiple soft locks that wasted hours and hours of my time. And I had to work in a dedicated Discord with their support team where I saw other YouTubers also expressing the same problems, that they ran into the same soft locks, and I was providing them the workaround I had encountered. And some of those YouTubers did mention some of their problems in their reviews. Others didn't mention it at all because they had been promised that those issues would be fixed by launch. And they were like, okay, then I won't mention it in the review. My policy, though, has always been that I'm not going to just take as gospel truth what a publisher or developer tells me until I can verify it myself. If they say, hey, the day one patch fixes this stuff and the problems you're having, I will still mention it in my review unless I see that the launch version does not have those issues. In which case, talking about it's kind of stupid because it's not something anybody will ever experience, right? But unless I can try the day one patch before my video goes up to verify it's made those improvements, I'm not going to just blindly trust what a big company trying to sell their product is telling me, right? Like, and that sometimes people think is like me being too harsh or a negative Nancy or something, but I just think it's reasonable. You know, if everybody believed CDPR when Cyberpunk previews and impressions were coming out, and everybody's like, so it was really, really buggy and kind of broken, but they said all of this is going to be fixed in the launch version. So they just decide to cut out all mention of technical problems in their preview. That would end up sort of unintentionally deceiving everybody who watched that video, thinking that the game ran really well for them or even just solid for them because they believed something that didn't end up being true. And to be clear, this isn't always somebody intentionally lying. It's the marketing people asking the engineers, hey, we've got some people who are having problems. Is this going to be fixed at launch? Yeah, we hope it's going to be fixed. We're trying really hard. Might not, but we're trying really hard. The plan is to fix it by then. And so the marketing person comes back and says, hey, it's going to be fixed by launch. Like, they're not really trying to lie or anything. It's just that they ended up being mistaken and it didn't end up being accurate. So I want to be clear that when I talk about Borderlands, I will describe what my experience has been like. And I will mention what I've been told as for improvements and where they're going to make adjustments and stuff like that. But like I said earlier in the stream, I think they basically sent out review codes a tad too early. And that led to some of these previews that had mixed performance issues. And basically they're cutting it really close to the finish line for when they're putting this stuff out. I think a little too close. He took my thing.